Christmas ornaments, drywall, and Jeffrey Epstein. Name 3 things that don't hang themselves. That's what the American people think. And they deserve some answers.
This Epstein case is probably the most blatant example of a public murder of a crucial witness I've ever seen in my entire life, and the minimal amount of outrage. When I found out that Clinton flew no less than 26 times on a plane with Epstein, I was like, dude, I haven't flown that many times with my mom. This is all stuff that everybody used to think was conspiracy. This is stuff where people are just delusional. They believe all kinds of wacky conspiracies.
This was shaping up to be the biggest news story in history. And the instant he died, the story just fell off the face of the earth.
I could maybe forgive people who were associating with Epstein before the conviction. Maybe they didn't know. This guy's on a sex offender registry. This is all in the public sphere.
One Google search.
And you're still hanging around with him?
Hey, welcome back to the Genuine Questions YouTube channel. I'm going through these old stories and telling them in this sequence because they lay the foundation for what I think is going on in the present day. And now that we're getting closer to the current events, there are going to be a couple of things that we talked about in previous videos that we're going to refer back to, as all of these stories just build upon each other. And in this episode, we're going to look back at the Jeffrey Epstein case and talk about everybody who was associated with them and ask the genuine question, why haven't they been questioned or held accountable? So we're going to start with Prince Andrew, because this interview that he does on the BBC is hilarious. He is so incredibly guilty. He comes across looking terrible in this, and I have no idea who advised him to do this interview, but I love that person because this has made me laugh so much. And in the first clip that we're going to watch of him, he denies being friends with Jeffrey Epstein. But then he goes on a few minutes later to say that they were such good friends that he had to go dump him face to face because it would be dishonorable to do it over the phone. And he's also going to say that they only saw each other like 3 times a year. And I just want to point out, for international friends who live on separate continents, 3 times a year is a lot to see somebody. I don't even see my own brother 3 times a year. So safe to say, if they're hanging out 3 times a year, they're pretty tight.
And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people. I suppose I saw him once or twice a year, perhaps maybe maximum of 3 times a year. And quite often, if I was in the United States and doing things, and if he wasn't there, he would say, well, why don't you come and use my houses? So I said, that's very kind, thank you very much indeed. But it would be a considerable stretch to say that he was a very, very close friend.
You've been on his private plane?
Yes.
You've been to stay on his private island?
Yes.
You've stayed at his home in Palm Beach?
Yes.
You visited Ghislaine Maxwell's house in Belgravia in London?
Yes.
He was released in July. Within months, by December of 2010, you went to stay with him at his New York mansion. Why? Why were you staying with a convicted sex offender?
Right. I felt that doing it over the telephone was the chicken's way of doing it. I had to go and see him and talk to him. And I took the decision that I had to show leadership, and I had to go and see him, and I had to tell him, that's it.
He threw a party to celebrate his release, and you were invited as the guest of honour.
Oh, in 2010? There certainly wasn't a party to celebrate his release in December, because it was a small dinner party. There were only 8 or 10 of us, I think, at the dinner. If there was a party, then I'd know nothing about that.
You were invited to that dinner as a guest of honour?
Well, I was there, so there was a dinner. I don't think it was quite as you might put it, but yeah, okay, I was there at a dinner, yeah.
I'm just trying to work this out, because you said you went to break up the relationship, and yet you stayed at that New York mansion several days. I'm wondering how long...
But I was doing a number of other things while I was there.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
Might seem a funny way to break off a friendship. A 4-day house party of sorts with a dinner. It's an odd way to break
It's a
up
difficult
friendship.
way of putting it. That's a very stark way of putting it. Yes, you're absolutely right. But at the time, I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do. And I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
This next clip is all of the various alibis that Prince Andrew gives. He doesn't remember the accuser. The picture that they have of him and her and Ghislaine Maxwell might be photoshopped. He doesn't know. He can't sweat. And he was at a Pizza Planet with his kids, who were like 17 at the time, on the night in question. So he couldn't have done it. And this is great, so let's listen.
One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts,
Yeah.
has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No. I can't. I've racked my brain and thinking, oh, well, when the allegations came out originally, I went, well, that's a bit strange. I don't remember this. And then I've been through it and through it and through it over and over and over again. And no, nothing. Never happened.
She provided a photo of the
Yes.
two of you together.
Yes,
Your arm was around her waist.
yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't. From the investigations that we've done, you can't prove whether or not that photograph is faked or not, because it is a photograph of a photograph of a photograph. So it's very difficult to be able to prove it.
But it's possible that it was you with your arm around
That's
her waist.
me, but whether that's my hand or whether that's the position, I have simply no recollection of a photograph ever being taken. And I'm not entirely convinced that, I mean, that is what I would describe as me in that picture, but we can't be certain as to whether or not that's my hand on her, whatever it is, left side. So that's the best explanation I can give you.
She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating, because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply it was almost impossible for me to sweat, and it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it, so therefore.
Do you remember dancing at Tramp?
No, that couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. A very unusual thing for me to do. I've only been to Woking a couple of times, and I remember it weirdly distinctly. But as soon as somebody reminded me of it, I went, oh yes, I remember that.
So this last clip of Prince Andrew is going to be of him saying that in spite of everything and Jeffrey Epstein convicted for being a human trafficker, he does not regret their friendship because a lot of great things happened to him from because of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. And keep in mind, this is the same friendship that he began this interview by denying the existence of. But he also doesn't regret it, and he's not going to testify about it unless he is forced to. And at the very end, I want you to notice something that politicians, famous people, guilty people do when they're asked a question that's they don't want to answer, and the question is not funny, their answer is not funny, but when they laugh when they're answering the question, that's usually a tell or an indication that that person is being dishonest about something. That's why they're laughing, because they're uncomfortable or hoping to distract or deflect to something else. And the interviewer asked Prince Andrew about the rumors that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself, but was actually murdered. And you'll notice that Prince Andrew laughs when he's answering that question.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not. And the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful. Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender.
You seem utterly convinced you're telling the truth. Would you be willing to testify or give a statement under oath if you were asked?
If push came to shove and the legal advice was to do so, then I would be duty-bound to do so. If I was in a position to be able to answer all these questions in a way that gave sensible answers, other than the ones that I've given that gave closure, then I'd love it. But I'm afraid I can't. I'm just not in a position to do so, because I'm just as much in the dark as many people.
Epstein was found dead.
Yep.
In prison.
Yes.
In August of this year.
Yep.
What was your response on hearing that he'd died?
Shock.
Some people think that he didn't take his own life.
Well, there again, I'm not one to be able to answer that question.
The next pervert that had a ridiculous excuse about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is lawyer Alan Dershowitz. And Alan Dershowitz was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer who negotiated that sweet plea deal for him in 2008, where he basically just had to go to jail a couple hours a day, I think, and was able to have people come visit him and stuff. It was ridiculous. But Alan Dershowitz is also accused by these girls of having had sex with them. And Alan Dershowitz admits that he got massages at Jeffrey Epstein's house, but says he kept his underwear on the whole time. And I understand that he has to defend the worst of the worst. That's your job as a defense attorney. Everybody deserves the best legal counsel they can get. But why do you have to go over to his house and get a massage? You're very well paid. If you need a massage, you can go to an actual massage therapist and pay for one. Why are you going over to the house of your client who's a convicted human trafficker who was having underage girls give massages? Why would you go over to his house, even if you keep your underwear on? And we're going to watch this video where he freaks out on Laura Ingraham on Fox News. It's pretty crazy how irate and ridiculous he sounds trying to defend himself. Makes himself sound super guilty.
Why is he going after me? I have to tell you, I have a theory. I think he's projecting. David Boies has a terrible reputation for sexual activities, and I've issued a challenge to him. Look, I've had sex with one woman since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. I challenged David Boies to say under oath that he's only had sex with one woman during that same period of time. He couldn't do it. So he has an enormous amount of chutzpah to attack me and to challenge my perfect sex life.
I kept my underwear on during the massage. I don't like massages particularly.
Something that frustrates me about trying to find this clip to make this video is I heard the I have the perfect sex life clip live. I was watching Laura Ingram's show that night when he said it. So that's how I knew to go look for it, because I remember it was hysterical. And I couldn't find it anywhere on YouTube. I knew it was on Fox. I was thinking it was maybe Sean Hannity, but I was typing in things like Alan Dershowitz, Perfect Sex Life, and the Laura Ingraham episode kept coming up. But I would watch the whole thing, and there was no part where he was ridiculously insisting that he has the perfect sex life, which is how he can't be guilty of what he's accused of. And it wasn't on there, so I kept thinking I had made a mistake. And then I actually ended up finding it on this place, the Young Turks, who are a super left-wing progressive YouTube channel, and they were making fun of Alan Dershowitz as well, and they had it on there. So I went back to watch that Laura Ingraham episode again just to make sure I didn't miss it, and it's not on there. So Fox News is helping scrub Alan Dershowitz's reputation and get that embarrassing footage off the internet. And that's also why I stopped watching Sean Hannity, is because when these allegations came out about Alan Dershowitz, who was a frequent contributor on Hannity's show, he defended him. The source said that Alan Dershowitz was involved, and so was Bill Clinton. And Sean Hannity was like, well, Bill Clinton's definitely involved, but not Alan Dershowitz. And I don't support that. If you believe the accuser about one of the accused, then you should believe her about all of them, unless you have a good reason not to. And the fact that Alan Dershowitz is a Fox News contributor on your show is not a good reason to defend him. So, yuck to Sean Hannity. Speaking of Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein used Bill Clinton to get that sweetheart deal in 2008 as well. He pled, as part of his application to the judge to get this plea deal, he cited the fact that he worked for the Clinton Global Initiative. And if you remember from one of the earlier episodes where we talked about locking Hillary up and what her email scandal was really all about, you'll know that the Clinton Global Initiative was the corrupt arm of the Clinton Foundation, where all of the pay-to-play influence peddling took place between the Clintons and foreign businessmen and leaders. And so Jeffrey Epstein says in his application to the judge that that is something that should be positive on his character, that he was instrumental in setting up the Clinton Global Initiative. And Bill Clinton doesn't deny this either. He actually says that's why he was on Jeffrey Epstein's flight list 26 times, is not because they were going to the pedophile island, but because they were flying around the world doing humanitarian work for the Clinton Foundation. So according to both of them, Jeffrey Epstein was instrumental in setting up the Clinton Global Initiative, which we all know is super corrupt. That's another connection between the two of them, yet Bill Clinton says that he doesn't really know Jeffrey Epstein. I would like to know why you would say you don't know him. Why can't you just say that you knew him, but you didn't know that he was involved in that stuff? Why are you allowing him to name drop in order to get a better deal from a prosecutor? I would think that if I didn't really know him and didn't know what he was up to, and then I found out he was trying to piggyback on my reputation to get himself a more lenient sentence, I would stand up and denounce what he's trying to do here. But clearly, based on the way that Jeffrey Epstein's sentence turned out, that's not what happened. Which brings us to another predominant businessman who has extensive connections to Jeffrey Epstein, but also just denies knowing him, and that is Victoria's Secret owner Les Wexner. And he was Jeffrey Epstein's only client in Jeffrey Epstein's money managing business. Jeffrey Epstein had no prior experience before he started working for Les Wexner. Les Wexner gave him power of attorney and allowed him access to all of his bank accounts to spend his money. He gave him, I believe, 2 free private jets and also the most expensive townhouse in Manhattan. And public records also indicate that no money was exchanged in the transaction of that townhome in Manhattan. Les Wexner comes out after Jeffrey Epstein is dead and says that, oh yeah, that guy stole like $40 million from me, but I don't really know him that well. And I didn't really care to try to get my $40 million back. So that's Les Wexner's story, that he didn't really know him that well, yet he was willing to give him power of attorney and hire him as his only client in his money managing business when that guy had no prior experience. But he doesn't really know him and doesn't know a lot about him. So I don't know if Les Wexner is somehow being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein, or was being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein, or if it's maybe like a situation like the TV show Breaking Bad, but instead of meth, it's, you know, human trafficking, and Les Wexner would sort of be like the Gus character, the head of the public corporation. Instead of Los Pollos Hermanos, like in Breaking Bad, it's the limited brands, and you are the philanthropist in the community who is a predominant businessman, employs a lot of people, donates a lot of your money, so you stay in everybody's good graces and people don't really look too hard at what you're doing. And it's a money laundering scheme for your human trafficking business. I would like to see somebody ask a few genuine questions to Les Wexner so we can maybe probe to find out why he gave Jeffrey Epstein so much influence over all of his finances and was so instrumental in helping him conduct his human trafficking schemes. That brings us to the last person that we're going to discuss, and that is Bill Gates, who's obviously a big deal in current events. And Bill Gates is the only person that I'm aware of who befriended Jeffrey Epstein after he was a convicted sex offender. And so we're going to watch this video on NBC where they ask some questions about what that connection is all about.
Gates' name came up in connection with Epstein and MIT Media Lab. Gates gave a statement to the Wall Street Journal where he insisted he did not have any business relationship or friendship with Epstein. But new reporting from the New York Times outlines numerous meetings between Gates and Epstein and a conversation with Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, a connection between their foundation and JP Morgan to set up a charitable fund that would financially benefit Epstein. You know what I want to know? Why? Gates says, no relationship, nada, nothing. You report these two men met at least 6 times. What does Gates say about that?
Well, I believe there were more, and he and his spokespeople would not say how many in total they actually met. But this included visits to the mansion, seeing each other in Seattle, flying on Epstein's plane, when we all know Bill Gates has his own $40 million plane. And then, as an investigative reporter, why would Gates say, oh, I had no relationship with him, when of course he knows what the facts are? So that always sets off red flags for me.
He also has one of the largest, most established foundations on his own.
Yes.
Why would they ever set up a charitable trust benefiting Jeffrey Epstein?
Well,
What's the explanation?
not only does he have the world's largest charitable foundation, but one of their primary missions is to help young women in underprivileged countries. Jeffrey Epstein was preying on young women from Eastern Europe, from South Africa, luring them into his web. And it's the antithesis of what the Gates Foundation stands for. And by the way, there were Gates Foundation employees who were horrified when they realized what Jeffrey Epstein had done and was saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this, and yet the project went on.
And what is the Gates explanation for this?
That it was all about philanthropy, that Bill Gates just wanted to find new sources of money.
But when you went and met with Jeffrey Epstein a year and a half ago, I read your piece, you knew straight out of the gate something didn't add up. It smelled foul. Bill Gates didn't notice that? One of the smartest guys in the world.
So Bill Gates is the richest, second richest person in the world, yet he seeks out the company of a convicted sex offender in order to set up charity organizations to benefit young girls. That doesn't really add up. But there was a employee of the Gates Foundation who came out and said that the reason Bill Gates was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein was because Bill Gates was obsessed with getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And he thought that for some reason, hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein would help him get that. So it was reported on in this Norwegian newspaper that in March of 2013, Epstein and Bill Gates went to the home of the then Nobel Committee chairman. And a spokesperson for Bill Gates responds to the story by saying, while a Nobel Prize would certainly be a great honor, it's false to state that Bill Gates was obsessed with the honor, set it as a goal, or campaigned for it in any way. So he doesn't dispute that he was at the guy's house with Jeffrey Epstein. He just says that he was not there campaigning for the Nobel Prize. So my question then is, why were you there? If there are two scenarios here. You either went over there because for some reason the Nobel Prize committee must be corrupt and it's not really about world peace, it's about which human trafficking sex offender you're best friends with, or they were over there talking about something else. But nobody seems to be disputing the fact that they were there. So which is it and what were you talking about? And I'm going to want to know the answer to that question to judge Bill Gates's moral character before I start blindly taking his medical advice. But we will get into that issue in a future episode. There are allegations that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to CIA and the intelligence communities. It's like an asset who would get these high-profile celebrities and politicians into compromising situations, and then they could use it as blackmail. And that's how the CIA gets people to do their bidding, or one of the ways the CIA would get you to do their bidding. And so the Alex Acosta, who was the prosecutor who signed off on this deal for Jeffrey Epstein in 2008, he said that he was told to do so because Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. So that's where this rumor comes from and why people think that. Not sure if those allegations are true or not, but it certainly would explain a lot and about how Jeffrey Epstein operated and why he got away with the deal that he got and how he was connected to the high-profile people that he associated with. And there are also rumors out there that Disney is connected to the CIA. Those rumors have something to do with the land that Disney World is on was actually, I guess if you look at the financial records, paid for by the CIA. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I have heard it, and if it's true, it would also explain a lot, like the fact that we have Ghislaine Maxwell here doing a Children's Day sponsored by Disney as far back as 1985. And so there's just another connection between Disney and Jeffrey Epstein. But another one that I noticed one time is that if you take a Disney cruise, as you can see here, this is from magicalkingdoms.com with the prices and the list of the Disney cruise excursions, you can do Captain Nautica's snorkeling expedition, which is on Little St. James Island, which is also known as Epstein Island. So why is Disney, one of the most profitable organizations in the world, why do they need to have a snorkeling excursion stop on Jeffrey Epstein's island? Are they paying Jeffrey Epstein for this service? Are they taking advantage of this because Jeffrey Epstein is giving it to them for free? Why would he be giving it to him for free? There's a lot of questions there that I've never heard anybody ask. So I would love to know why Disney is partnering up with a human trafficker for snorkeling excursions. And there is an organization called Project Veritas that will go undercover, or sort of like WikiLeaks, will get information from whistleblowers that exposes corruption in various organizations. And back in 2019, they received a video that was taken from the lady who does, I believe, Good Morning America, Amy something with an R. And she is talking, and you can tell when people are speaking candidly and when they're reading from a script. And in my opinion, in this clip that we're going to watch, this Amy woman is speaking candidly. I don't believe that she knows that she is on camera and she is talking like she would just to a friend and telling the truth. And what she is talking about is how she had all of this reporting on Jeffrey Epstein 3 years ago. So back in at least 2016, and she took it to ABC, and ABC said they weren't interested in pursuing her story because they were afraid with the Prince Andrew connection, they weren't going to have access to William and Kate for interviews, and the story's not interesting, and nobody knows who Jeffrey Epstein is, so who cares? Which I find incredibly frustrating because I actually knew who Jeffrey Epstein was like 10 years ago. In 2010, I was just looking on this website and it was like listed as a conspiracy theory. But you could see the picture with Prince Andrew with his arm around this girl with Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. And you heard about the Lolita Express and that Bill Clinton was associated with them. You could hear all those rumors back in 2010. So that information was out there. He was a convicted sex offender at that point. And got this crazy sweetheart deal from the government where he didn't even get punished. And then started hanging out with all these rich celebrities and foreign dignitaries as soon as he got out of jail. So that would be an interesting story that's right there for the media to go after. But even if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't find it until 2016, when I was able to find it in 2010, they still squashed it and said nobody would care about it and it's not interesting. So they let, best case scenario, ABC is responsible for 3 additional years of Jeffrey Epstein trafficking these young girls. And we are going to listen to Amy, in her own words, describe how that went down.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
But the creepy thing is that we would make access to all of these high-profile people.
Well, then I got a little concerned about why I couldn't get on. So do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. Yeah. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment.
I mean, when I heard he was found dead, was just out selling his money.
I knew immediately. And they made it seem as though he made that suicide attempt 2 weeks earlier, but his lawyers claimed that he was roughed up by his cellmate around the neck. That was all like to plant the seed, and then that's why I really believe it. Like, really believe it.
Evidence, like, in the, unexplained.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell, who I had all sorts of stuff on her too. I love it. I'm like, it's so funny to hear everyone say her name now, because I'm like, oh my God, like, I had all that, and everyone was like, who's that? Who cares? I kept getting that. Who cares? She knows everything. She knows. She should be careful. Well, she was his, like, she went out and recruited all of these girls.
Stand by.
She should watch her back. Because if she goes, I mean, I'd have like security guards all around me.
I'd like to point out, when that video was initially leaked, people were saying that this Amy girl was, a hero for speaking out about this and telling the truth. No, she's not. She's not upset that Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to do this for an additional 3 years. She's upset that she's not getting the Pulitzer Prize for breaking the story. And she's happy to continue to work for ABC, knowing that they are willing to cover up for a human trafficker. So she gets no credit for being a decent, credible person whose opinion you should take seriously about anything. She'll has sold her soul to the devil. Thanks for watching the Jeffrey Epstein episode of Genuine Questions. On the next episode of Genuine Questions, we're going to look at the first time they impeached Donald Trump. And I think that story is interesting because if you take the Democrats at their word, it actually totally negates the Russia collusion story that we talked about a few episodes ago. So we're going to take a look at the doublespeak that is going on while they were impeaching Trump the first time. And we'll also be asking a few genuine questions about Hunter Biden's roles in his father's administrations.
The press does not like to do stories where the problem is bipartisan. So when you have an institutional problem, when Democrats and Republicans both share responsibility for it, or if it's an institution that kind of exists in perpetuity no matter what the administration is, we don't really like to do those stories. If Fox likes to do stories about Democrats, MSNBC likes to do stories about Republicans. And I think this is one of the reasons why this story doesn't have a lot of traction in the media, because neither side really likes the idea of going too deeply on it.
So unfortunately, he sustained an injury that's you usually only get through strangulation.
Yeah,
someone murders you.
He fell on the ground and accidentally broke his hyoid bone. Happens all the time.
Whatever.
Right? Yeah.
No big deal.
When you've got videotape disappearing, cameras not working, guards allegedly not being where they're supposed to be, these things can happen, but they all shouldn't happen in one place.
They had a lot of people coming in and out of this compound, and what were they really up to? And was it all a blackmail scheme? If you think about it, a hedge fund's a perfect way to do blackmail. You can just have people putting money in and out all the time, and it would look like investment.